So, why am I in pain and how do I get out of it?
So why are you in pain and how do you get out of it? Great question. So people are in pain because they start to lose mobility in their joints and muscles. Movement is the key to healthy function and being rid of pain. And that's because of the ability for movement to properly activate signaling to the brain to give the brain an understanding of what that joint should be doing. And in that process, what it's doing is it's sending collateral information to our pain fibers, which right now are winning the race to the brain. So when we look at, let's say, an injured low back, right, we're going to call this a joint and a muscle and all these different things. This is a joint and a muscle around it. You have all these little things in here called receptors. And these little receptors are little cells that respond to movement. So everything responds to movement, and we're just going to draw kind of a muscle like this on either end of it. I'll draw this is not what it looks like, but this is just for illustrating purposes. So all these muscles have little receptors in them too. And the tendons have little receptors. And all these little receptors, these little cells, they all respond to movement and stretch and those types of things. They communicate through the spinal cord to the brain. And when these move, they send a signal to the brain to say, hey, we moved. This is what happened. The pelvis shifts or your lumbar spine rotates, whatever, your hip moves, whatever it might be. The brain understands what has occurred and then sends a signal back down to correspond or coordinate the movement that you're trying to do. What happens with people is that they lose this movement. The joints get stuck, the muscles get tight, and they lose this receptor activity to the brain. So they lose this afferent, this first step. There's two steps. You got to get the information up, and then the brain has to interpret it to come back down. But when the information doesn't get up there, it can't control it very well. And so what happens is the brain loses, it has a map up here. It has a map in the brain. You can imagine just a little map up there that it knows what this muscle and joint should be doing. And when you lose that information to it, you know that old expression, if you don't use it, you lose it. Well, you start to lose the illustration of this joint in the brain, and that map starts to become less accurate. It's like someone spilled coffee on it, or it kind of gets blurry. Now you can't control the area that you have a problem with, and this can be the neck, it can be the shoulder, the knee, the foot. It doesn't matter where it is. It all works just like this. Now it can't control this, so now when you move and do things through life, you sit, you move, you sleep, now the brain can't coordinate it, so you keep injuring this joint, because when you move, the brain doesn't know how to respond, and it might move the joint too far, or your muscles might grab. So what it does, it says, I don't know what's going on down there. I'm gonna tighten everything up, and I'm gonna create a brace for it. Create swelling when that happens. When you sprain your wrist, you get swelling, it hurts. There's extra fluid in there, everything gets tight. The same thing happens for these guys, except it's induced by your brain because it just doesn't know what to do with it. So how we fix that is we restore this information to the brain through movement. So we get movement back into our joints and muscles and tendons and through these nerves, and the brain starts to understand, remap what's going on, and it can re-coordinate this. Now, what also happens, there's a third piece that happens here, which is a pain nerve that goes up to the brain. So if the brain isn't getting this good information about movement, it starts to interpret everything going on down here as pain, because that is winning the race. Because usually the pain nerves, type C nerves, they're slower. They're not slow in reality, but they're slower than this one. This is the movement nerves, 1A, 1B, and they're really fast. Unless they didn't even start the race, which is what happens here. They didn't even start the race, so pain wins. Now, when pain wins, we perceive pain all the time. Even when you move, even when you do innocuous things that shouldn't create pain, you're going to get problems. Now, the other thing that these faster nerves do is they actually send a collateral over to these pain fibers to inhibit it. So when not only do we beat the information to the brain so that the brain says, oh, you're moving instead of being in pain, it's additionally, redundantly, if you will, sending another signal over to the pain fiber to inhibit it. So it's doing two things, and it's making sure you don't have pain when you don't have pain, because it's not an accurate signal. The brain doesn't like that. Now, you say, well, that's really easy. Maybe you said that. It kind of makes sense, right? If we just have movement to the brain, that's great. It's going to rewire everything it needs to. Well, why is it, how do we do that? Well, it doesn't just happen with one treatment. It doesn't just happen with a quick adjustment. It doesn't happen with a quick muscle stretch or to strengthen something. You have to do these things over and over and over again. And you might say, well, that's unfortunate. This is going to take time. This is going to take frequency to change. It is unfortunate if you think about it like that way, or it's fortunate that your body works like this, so every little thing that happens doesn't send you into a spiral of dysfunction. So it's very important that things happen slowly in the body so that the alternative doesn't happen and every little thing creates this huge problem in the brain. So it takes a while oftentimes, or one big stimulus, to get to this point. So, you can injure yourself with one big thing, right? One big injury, and that can create all of these things. Most people leave them there for a while and don't get them treated, so they build up efficiency in the wrong way, or inefficiency, if you will. But they build up really efficiency in this pain pathway, and they build up efficiency in the mapping the wrong way. So they're misperceiving what's going on here really well. So they're building a bad habit, if you will. When by the time usually we get to these things, we have to go back and reset and retrain this misperception. Think about it like breaking a bad habit. And it takes a little while to break a habit, right? That is why, because you have to reduce the bad habit while improving the good habit until they just goes away. That's called neuroplasticity. That's just retraining and rewiring the brain's understanding of what's going on somewhere. This is why we do so well with patients here, is because we approach all of these things through neuroscience and neurology. That's what a chiropractic neurologist is we approach all these pain and symptom, numbness, tingling, disc issues, back issues, neck issues, headaches, all these things through neuroscience. Now, it takes, like I said, frequency. So to create neuroplasticity, to create these changes, we have to replace the pain pathway with the good pathway. We don't just shut the pain pathway down. You can't just do that. But what you can do is you can build up the good pathway again, which will shut the pain pathway down. So it's not that this is just overactive because it's overactive. It's overactive because something else is underactive, right? And the underactive thing is the movement and these stronger, faster movement nerves to the brain, pathways, if you will, through the spinal cord, and that remaps it. So what we need frequency. This is the part that people tend to make a mistake on. They try to do it a different way. They say, well, I'm not really able to get in that frequently and because I'm busy. And of course people are. We all know that. We're all busy. The problem is this just doesn't work well if you don't do that. So when we hear people say that, a lot of empathy for that. We're all busy. I'm here all day. I get it. But your body doesn't care. And so your body needs this frequency. And often, for most people, it's 3 times a week or higher for a limited amount of time. This is not forever, because our goal is not to keep you, our goal is to get you better. It's not to get you a little better, it's to get you completely better, all the way better. And it's also, our goal is to do that in the shortest amount of time possible. We don't want you to have to come back for this. This is not an ongoing thing. Neuroplasticity, this approach, once you're better, you're better. That's just how it works. You've retrained the system. Now, if you do stuff continuously to re-injure things, or it's the way you sleep or the way you do things, yeah, eventually you may need to address this again in some degree. But if you do strengthening and stretching and all the things you should do, you're going to avoid this most of the time. So we need to have frequency. We need to have that. It's not something I made up. This is just neurology. This is neuroscience. This is science. And it takes time. It takes time to do this. Like, this is a cumulative effect. In the beginning, we have to do a lot of work with not a lot of changes in your symptoms that you might perceive yet. But like when you plant a seed, it takes time of nurturing that seed, soil, sun, water, plant food, whatever, to actually see it start to sprout up. When it starts to sprout up, you actually see it bloom quite quickly. And that's what happens with care. It starts out rather slowly, but then really picks up after a while. But in order to get to this, you have to have this higher frequency. In the beginning, we need time. This can take, it depends on how long you've had it and how many cofactors or comorbidities, we call them, are occurring. How good a shape are you in? Like I said, how long has it been there? Do you have arthritis? Do you have other aspects? Now, these things aren't inhibitors. They're just smaller obstacles that we have to get over, and we have to assume that it's going to take time. And the other thing we need is comprehensive care. That is one of the most important things that we do here, is we combine many therapies, different types of therapies, to access all the different types of receptors that live in our body to make this change in the brain as quickly as possible. Even though 2, 3, 4 months may not seem quick to you, it is quick for this type of stuff. And so when we do a higher frequency plan plus the comprehensive care, this happens as quickly as it possibly can. We are doing it as quickly as we can. And this comprehensive care means we're going to address disc issues with decompression therapy. All these things are comfortable. They're not, it's not like going in for surgery or something. It's conservative care. And we do chiropractic as one part of it. We do physical therapy, we do occupational therapy, we do hyperbaric oxygen therapy for some people that need an extra boost in healing. In that physical therapy part is muscle stim and stretch, specialized stretching, neurological stretching, and percussor therapy, and intersegmental traction, and all of these things that we do to combine these receptors to remap as quickly as possible. And the key, this is really important, because I have people that say, well, I have a TENS unit at home. That is fantastic. A TENS unit is not nearly anything you would use in a doctor's office, but it does have a place, and it can help topically with a little bit of pain because of the cutaneous skin receptors that it helps activate to inhibit this pain through the collaterals. But it's not really fixing much. The key is that individually, all these therapies that I just named, chiropractic, stretching, strengthening, percussor, decompression, they all have their place and work really well, but they don't work as well alone. They work well enough, but they don't work as well as they do when you combine them in a short amount of time. By short amount of time, I mean 30 to 45 minutes, an hour. You come in and you get all these things. We layer these therapies on top, and these receptors, which don't have a long activation life, so that's why we need to have everything close together. They all combine to shift that. But that's called layering of therapies. We add these therapies on top of each other to make a stronger neurological change or activation. And so that's really important, this layering of care or layering of treatments. All of these things it's neurology.